So, in the last session, we covered the idea of learning and development in general by using the training and development model. And you notice that there were a lot of steps within it. And if you focus on each one as you build, envision, and test, I think it'll add a little bit of a focus. We also looked at the idea of Hollywood movies, right? The same process that you use to create Hollywood movies, you would use to create e-learning. At least that's a nice way to start, because your audience has got to move some sort of a motivation, some sort of an emotion. They have to feel things that are related to what it is you're trying to teach them, so that they can register better in their brain and maybe take ownership for it. Now, in this session, we're going to move to a topic called taxonomy. It's important to learning if you take it seriously, if you want to do it professionally. The objectives that are being met have to apply to a certain order on a taxonomy. And we're going to use the most famous one called Bloom's. And it sounds like a lot. And in fact, it's just a pyramid. It's not Maslow, it's Bloom's pyramid. But if you look at it, and as you're writing objectives and thinking about what is it that my e-learning or any learning is going to accomplish, you will be surprised how you can move it up the pyramid and say, you know what, I think my employees deserve this, or my employees really need to accomplish this or achieve this. And it'll give you a little bit more focus. And we're going to look at writing some objectives as well, because for your lesson plan assignment, you have to write objectives, obviously, 3 to 5, and also add Bloom's words next to each one. And for your e-learning build, you have to do the same thing. So let's get right into how to do this. So here it is. This is a taxonomy. It looks like a pyramid, and you could flip it if you want. I'm not going to say it's a hierarchy. Like, it's not like you have to do the bottom before you can get to the top. Invariably, though, sometimes it is the case. Like, you can't create something if you can't remember anything. But this particular one is the most famous one in the learning and development field. It's Bloom's taxonomy. And taxonomies are not complicated. They make you think about each level of the pyramid. And the one at the bottom, obviously, should mean that it's the most common or the most easy, if you want to label it. And in some cases, yes, like I said before, unless you get the bottom one ready, you can't go higher up. So let's start at the bottom. When you design learning, when you design a lesson or a course or a video or anything at all, it has to have an objective, or objectives, more than one. And that objective, whatever it is you will be able to do by the end of this learning, that objective could take the form of any of these 6 levels on the taxonomy. Quite often you design training where it's simply remembering at the bottom, where your only purpose in training a person, your employee, is so that they can remember it. It doesn't matter if they appreciate it or understand it in any way or could use it. It's just to remember. And I think a traffic light signal, if you can just tell the whole world that red means stop, you don't have to know why. Don't have to question why it's red. Just stop your car. Now, a separate lesson would be how to stop your car. Put your foot on the brake. I mean, another lesson would be where to stop your car, which would be at the white line. Don't worry about why we do it. You might know it's the law, but I just want to teach you to stop when the light is red. Just remember that. And then actually at the white line. Now, if there's a technique to applying the brake, now you need to go a little bit further up, because you're not just asking a person to remember to do it. They actually have to do it. You see? So remembering tasks, things that you teach, are simply where an employee has to remember. You have to remember to log in. You have to remember to put the keys away. You have to remember to lock the door behind you. You have to remember the 5 rules of health and safety. You have to remember to press the yellow button before you press the red button. Now, if we move up the ladder a little bit, if what is remembered needs to be understood, context, why did you learn it? Why do you need to know it? Why do you need to do it? What's the meaning behind it? So I think you have learned. The reason that you stop at a red light, the understanding would be, why do you do it? Because there's traffic coming from the other direction, sideways or laterally, right? So you're moving it up. Do you want your learner to understand that which was remembered? Right? Think about it. So if you're doing a whole lesson on how to color hair, let's say you're doing it for a large chain of salons, hair salons, and you could teach your people who work at the salon that this is the 5 different types of colors. It would be nice if you allowed them to understand why those 5 colors exist. Why are there 5 colors? What are the implications, the contextual meaning? Maybe it's a cultural thing. Maybe it's a matter of style, design, what goes well with the facial structure. See, now the person's appreciating, they're understanding why there are 5 colors. They remember there's 5 colors, no big deal. And if all the person has to do is keep inventory, hey, who cares if they know why we do this, why we're selling it? There's just 5 colors, done. But if you need the hairdresser to actually apply those 5 colors, actually use them, and I got to tell you, if somebody went in and was going to pay $100+ to have their hair colored, and somebody messed it up because they didn't know how to do it, that would be a pretty big lawsuit. It would be very upsetting anyways. The person remembers what the 5 colors are. They understand what they're for. They just had no clue how to apply. So when you use learning and development, especially e-learning, to teach people how to apply a concept that they're clearly supposed to remember and understand why it is, it's the application side, I think, is where most e-learning sits on the high end. Okay? There's limits. So can this person, by the time I'm done, apply that which is remembered and understood? And how do you achieve that? I mean, in a digital environment, how do you actually get a person to apply? Well, think about it. Look, most of you have taken my Excel course, or HRIS, and there's Excel in it. Certainly we taught you what a cell is. Heck, remember it. Remember what a cell is. You remember what a cell address is, D5. You probably understood the use of it, meaning you could put words and numbers into it, but then you actually had a chance to apply it by simply watching me do it and explain it. I actually said put an equal sign, put A5 times B5, and the times would be that little asterisk or the star. That would be remembering. And when you do that, and you're actually able to do it again by yourself independently in Excel, you just apply that which is remembered and understood. Quite often, I got to tell you, skills that are developed that are application in nature, many people just don't understand. Listen, I've had clients in the manufacturing, high-tech manufacturing. They come in 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock. They're really good, awesome at their job. It's a critical job. They have to trim this little tiny piece of plastic off a circuit board. You have to make sure the soldering is good, the welding, whatever you call it, quality control. They keep doing it like robots every single day, and they're really good at it. But if you ask them, what the heck is that thing, they would have absolutely no clue what that part does. And maybe the company just doesn't want them to know. But they understand what they're doing, not necessarily why. So you can achieve understanding simply by repetition, remembering by repetition, first of all. Understanding by attaching some sort of anecdotal stories by people who use whatever it is they're doing, people who are impacted, maybe some pictures, some videos. And then if you apply some exercises and trust that the user will do it, the learner will do it, then you can develop some sort of applying. And later I'm going to show you, I hope I don't forget, but I'm going to show you I did a virtual reality. So that's digital learning, okay? About pre-flight check on a Cessna airplane. It's about a $500,000 airplane. And we have, what, 22 of them in Peterborough, the college. And if you think that we can't teach you how to do a pre-flight check without actually being anywhere near the plane, well, I'll tell you otherwise. Let me tell you the background. The flight students who are in a 4-year degree program, they pay a lot of money. It's the most expensive program at the college. And if they finish, they get a great job. But their first year is at Newnham campus, right? In the classroom. And they're itching to get near an airplane. Unfortunately, our airplanes are at the Peterborough campus. That's about an hour and a half away, 2 hours away. And they're itching, and we lose so many people in first year because we don't get them near an airplane. But here's what we do. In first year, we slap them on with VR headsets or just a desktop. They get to go through the virtual reality, like look all the way around a plane, get these little videos explaining each part of the pre-flight check, the PATO, the gas, the oil, the tires, the maintenance manual. And by the time they get near the airplane in second year, in their minds, in their brains, either in the front or deep down in their brains, they're so familiar with this airplane. They're able to apply what they learn through virtual reality. Of course, they still have to do the physical part of it more and more, but the learning curve is not as steep. Now, if we move up a little bit, if what has been learned has to be analyzed or kind of dissecting, if a person wants to figure out how was this done. For example, I know this is my job. I get why I'm doing it. I'm actually doing it. Of course, you remember. Then analyzing more contextual elements. I'm putting 6 things together to make a part. I think I know what the end part is, but actually teaching somebody to actually look at it from a different point of view. And when you do that, when you give a person the ability to analyze, to think about why is it we're doing this? What are the components going into what we're doing? If there's 6 steps to ultimate customer service, you can teach that to people, customer service reps. But if you sat down in a meeting with them, are they able to split it apart and question why? Could it be done differently? And when you achieve that level of skill, that level on the taxonomy, now your own employees might start looking at how to improve the process, make suggestions. They're analyzing. Not critiquing, that's different. That's the next one. But just looking at the work they do from a different point of view. It would be like me all of a sudden asking you, by the way, you've been fixing cars for 30 years. Can you tell me why that engine was built that way, why the design is that way? Now the mechanic says, I don't know anything about the design, I just fix them. But then they start saying, wait a minute, it would make more sense if they put this part over here and that part there. Not that that's going to happen because engineers decide that. Engineers are very good at analyzing. In fact, most of you in this class are good at analyzing. You don't just do stuff in life. I think you're able to think about what went into doing it, the components. So in learning, we can achieve analyzing skills by, using like storytelling or case study type methods, where you get to pick apart at the idea of what a company did and break it down into its individual components so you could deal with them. SWOT, for example. You're analyzing for SWOT. Or if I gave you some financial statements and you're able to split apart every little line item, you're analyzing. You're not judging. You're not evaluating in any way. You're not being critical. You're simply identifying what the components are. How did it get to this point? But moving one level higher to evaluating or being critical, this is where you get to pass judgment. And again, we have to be careful of biases. I mean, I'm not going to evaluate something that another person did after I analyze it saying, you're doing it wrong, just because it wasn't my way. We have to be careful. So evaluating is when you take stuff that is already done, ideas, work processes, whatever it might be, and actually critiquing and saying, wait a minute, this is the wrong approach, or this could be different, or even on the flip side, this is the ideal approach you're critiquing. You're making judgments, credible judgments. And of course, then you have to have some sort of rubric established. Well, we can accomplish this in e-learning by, again, giving a set of exercises, situational or hypothetical, behavioral type statements, let's say, even within a case study, and asking people in an exercise format to say, okay, you've identified what it is. You've identified the problems, the solutions, right? You broke it apart. But now what do you think? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? And if you remember in my last class, HRIS course, those of you that were in it, we did absenteeism and I gave you a 12% absenteeism rate. And I asked you to evaluate, be critical about it. Is it good or bad? And sure, on the rough side, passing against a benchmark, you said, well, any absenteeism is bad. Of course it is. But that would be a bad judgment. That would be bad evaluation. That's like saying, well, nobody should have got COVID then. Well, people do. You can break it apart. Who's getting it? Where is it? Which provinces, old age homes, etc. But evaluating is looking at more of the qualitative side of things and saying, okay, why do you think it happened? And that leads you, of course, to solutions to that particular problem, being critical. In fact, in your LSP 800 course, you are doing a lit review where you're reading other people's writing. And at some point, somebody taught you, somebody did learning and development to teach you how to be critical of other people's thoughts and ideas. What if I taught you how to remember the components of a car, how to put a car together? And you understood why you're doing it, to make a car, and why that design, because customers want it. Then you actually did the job. So my company's making cars, right? You applied it. Then I asked you to break your job down into various components, maybe even learn and listen from other people who do other parts of the work, other parts of the factory. But then I'm going to buy you a coffee. I'm going to sit you down and say, can you evaluate everything we're doing? And you say, yeah, you know what? That car's ugly. I know how to make it. I get it. I understand it. Of course, you remember it, else you wouldn't do anything else. But then you say, I would change this and I would change that. In fact, you might think it's ugly, and that's a very subjective thing. But you might say, why are we putting on the tires before we put on the transmission? And you're evaluating the process, you're being critical of it, and you're saying it would make more sense. We'll get 5% more efficiency if you held off on the tires. All it means is a guy has to run around a little bit more. Now, the ultimate, get this is what PhDs do, is creating. I just said PhDs because that's how it's set up, but you guys, all of you, at some point, develop the ability to create, synthesize. In the old Bloom's taxonomy, it was called synthesis. Can you synthesize? Well, you can't synthesize. You can't come up with original ideas, innovations, creativity, unless you can remember stuff, understand things, apply them, analyze critical components, evaluate good and bad, or likes and wants. Think about it. But if you can get all of that and you're intimate with whatever it is you're trying to teach people or learn, you can start creating. So is it possible for me to teach you online how to be creative, how to create? Of course. Again, a series of exercises. I'm no longer just going to show you diagrams of what it is or ask you to look at it and tell me how to do it differently. I'm literally going to say my company needs a marketing strategy. It's a product in the marijuana space and it tastes like licorice. That's it. You sit down, you come up with the best possible promotional strategy for that product. First thing you're going to say is get rid of the licorice flavor. See, you're creating, you're synthesizing in a way. You're helping build. So, I mean, there's plenty of examples of jobs where creating or synthesis is key. Engineers, for example, designers, artists, movie makers,
You yourselves, in fact, in HR, most of HR, it's already done, the creating side. But there's always room for innovation once in a while, right? Many of you are going to be really good. In fact, I've already observed many of you think like this anyways. You come up with ideas nobody else has. I'd like to think the Prime Minister of Canada has to be high up there, has to come up with solutions, or at least be evaluating the solutions that his ministers, his managers come up with. And not all leaders are the same. Now, generally, I'm going to explain this to you in the educational context, how our system is set up in North America, actually around the world. Is that your high school, well, elementary school starts teaching you about remembering. And unfortunately, high school in many places, that's all they do. It's called rote learning. Then in high school, we move you up to understanding, and that's usually after grade 9, deeply understanding. And depending on the course, you would start applying. Then you start writing essays and reports and business plans. Or in woodshop, you start making things. And around grade 12, grade 11, grade 12, you start analyzing. But in university, get this now, or in college, when you're doing a bachelor's program like you are, think about it. First 2.5 semesters, actually 3 semesters, there's a lot of remembering, quite a bit of understanding, and some applying. Now you get to analyze stuff and evaluate it. Not much on the creating side. Even the thesis you're going to write for LSP 800. If you really think about it, we're not pushing you to the creating side. But in our system, once you get a bachelor's degree like you're getting, where you've achieved up to that analyzing, almost evaluating side, a master's now, some sort of a master's gets you to do heavy work on the evaluating side. It's looking at stuff that already exists. Let's say you're doing science, looking at research that other people have already done, and literature, reviewing the heck out of it. You're not duplicating. Sorry, you're duplicating, sorry. You're not reinventing, you're not inventing. You're trying, in masters, you're trying to see if what other people have already done still works. But when you get to PhD, it starts off heavy on evaluating and moves almost solely to creating, because PhDs are now supposed to come up with their new things. Even if it's a smallest, slightly different way of doing something. That's what PhDs do. A new way, a new thought, new idea, new process, new chemical, new biological something, I don't know. New management method. But it doesn't have to be much, just a little tiny tweak. Because when you get tens of thousands of people around the world working in this educational environment, it's these little tiny things that add to some big body of knowledge. And in fact, right now with this COVID-19, the people working on the viruses, think about it. At some point, the education system has passed them through every element of this taxonomy, so that the people truly working on it, the Dr. Fauci's, for example, focus a lot just on the creating side. And there's an army of people below them feeding in the rest. Okay, so that's taxonomy. Now, the reason we're covering this in this class is the taxonomy has to be reflected in your objectives. So for example, at Seneca, we don't, other than first year, we can't just design a course where it's all just remembering. You should know this, you should know that, you should know that. In fact, in first year, we don't do the creating side either, but in upper year courses, we do get into creating, right? So in fact, in my course here, I'm giving you stuff. Like there's tools, there's Udemy, there's Blackboard, there's Powtoon, whatever tool, virtual reality. I'm not asking you to create something new. You're not inventing. The idea, the content that you're going to create e-learning around, sure, you might be creating the content. That's good. That's awesome. But you can truly achieve that last rung of creating in my own course if you figure out a new technique, a new way to use, to leverage the tools that already exist. So let's say you found an awesome way to get virtual reality working with Powtoon. I mean, nobody's thought of it. You just put 2 and 2 together. It's an awesome technique. That's good. No pressure. Let's have a look at some objectives. And I'm going to let you be a judge on objectives. So let's say the course is HRIS, right? And I start off with this line that says, by completing this module, so this is one module in a course, you will have the knowledge, skills, ability, or aptitude to, or you can just say you will be able to describe what an HRIMS is. I mean, the fact that you're able to describe it, that is applying. That's a language course, right? Think about it. But if you can just describe what HRIMS is, that's just understanding. So in a bracket next to this, I would write the word understanding. Now, if you're able to discuss the implication of HR technology to strategic management, that requires thought. That's actually understanding, knowledge and then understanding. And maybe just a little bit of that applying. You're applying your ability to look at an implication. Now, some other course would have taught you that, right? Then if I asked you to create a performance rating record on the HRIS and specify new review dates, you're not actually creating anything here. You're simply starting something. You're simply doing a transaction in HRIS. That will be applying. So we go from describe, which is knowledge, knowing, discuss, which is understanding, maybe some applying, and then create, which would be applying. Specify, yeah, that's fine, that's applying. Assess various options, I like this, okay, good. Now, so assess various options that can be added to core HRIMS. That would be your analyzing and maybe just borderline evaluating. So you can put two. You can put in brackets assessing / evaluating if there's two elements. The other option is to write two different objectives, right? But you want to be careful not to have too many objectives either. For your lesson plan assignment, it could be, I think I said 3 to 5, but you can do like 2, 3 if it's a 1-hour lesson. It's possible your entire lesson is just to achieve one objective. An entire course, this would be a course, what you're looking at, might have maybe up to 10 different objectives. I want you to be creative on that, okay? Understand how, that's just knowing and understanding. List all the modules, that's simply knowing, you're simply listing. Choose the best protocol. Now you're evaluating, you see? I'm asking you to choose something. Not identify it, not break it down, but actually choose it. You have to be a bit critical. Why are you choosing it? Because somebody might ask you, why did you choose it? Determine the best approach. That would also be evaluative. And provide guidance related to protocol, and that will be evaluative as well, and application. There's not really anything here that's synthesis or creating. But if I asked you to design a custom HRIMS, and design simply means on paper, what each screen would look like, writing down what it can do for the user. A custom HRIMS for a specific company with unique needs. Now you're on the creating side. You're able to take what you know, how it's applied, the critique of it, to create something unique for somebody else. Now in the next session, we're going to get into Universal Instructional Design, UID, not a difficult section. Just some elements that you have to, or you should, build into your e-learning, your digital learning, to keep things on a level playing field, consistent, fair, because we do have laws like AODA. And although we won't spend too much time on the law itself, I mean, you covered this in your law course. We're going to attach it as an implication. How do you make things accessible? Okay, so we'll see you in the next session.